Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Jonathan Jones.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here, Asher. How you feeling, man?
Feeling good. How about yourself?
Man, all is good on this side. No complaints. No complaints at all.
Awesome. Well, I think it'd be appropriate to introduce you to my audience by asking this question. Who do you say you are?
Who do I say I am? I would say that I am a teacher. I would say that I'm a lifelong learner, and I also would say I'm a man of faith. Man of faith, a husband, and a teacher, among other things. Yeah.
Awesome. I, I know one of the things, speaking on your role as a teacher, I met you in that capacity as it deals with being part of the morning meetup group hosted
Mhm.
by Dave Shands. And from time to time, I would see you lead some of the sessions and giving your insights in a way that's very educational. And even through your own podcast that you've started, teaching people how to get a podcast going, get it monetized, and giving back to student athletes at that. Tell me more. How did you get into like your teaching role?
Yeah. So, back in my journey after I graduated college, I was in that position like many other people. I'm just trying to figure out, where do I get a job? How can I get paid? I got to pay bills. And then I found myself at this nonprofit where I initially grew up in. And working this particular nonprofit, this was where, as a young guy, I learned I learned the importance of service. I learned the importance of volunteering and doing different things like that. And then when I graduated, I came back to that same nonprofit, and my CEO, he was like, Jonathan, I got an opportunity for you. Because he's been mentoring me over the years. I'd see him at holidays and different things like that. And I never wanted to go back and work here. I never wanted to go back and work. But he always like, I got a job for you. I got a job for you. And during that time, I went back, and then this same program that I was once fired from as a teacher, I had the opportunity to come back, and then I had the opportunity to run the program. So I'm going into an elementary school, and I'm the director. So helping other teachers, teach the kids, make sure the program's running smoothly, making sure that they have meals and stuff like that to eat. So that was when the light really turned on for me, just in teaching in that capacity, and also realizing how much I had a passion for just working with the youth and making sure that the kids that are struggling, if it be with the meal or struggling on a spelling test, making sure that they got the tools and everything that they needed to be successful for their lives.
Awesome. And I guess I'd have to kind of come back to it a little bit because I'm just curious, how did you end up getting fired the
Oh
first time
man.
around?
Oh my goodness, Asher. So I learned the hard way, man. I learned the hard way that you can never go into any role first wanting people to like you. You have to go into the role either. So, okay, so if I was somebody coming in as more so like, well, I came in as a teacher, and I wanted the kids to like me, right? So I'm like, I'm bringing candy. I'm doing what I would need to do to be quote unquote popular if I was another one of the kids. But
Right.
I was the teacher. So I should have went in there with the disposition of, you all are going to respect me, and then I can lighten up on the reins later if I desire to. But I went in too soft, man. I went in too
Gotcha.
soft, and then they ran me over.
Man.
Yeah,
I was gonna say you got in trouble for being too nice to the kids. The teachers are like, we can't have this.
man. I mean, it was just one of those things to where I just went about doing things the way that I thought was going to help me be successful. And
Mhm.
I learned the hard way that it was not.
Gotcha. So then from that point on, how did you, was it like getting fired that showed you like, okay, this doesn't work, or did you have to have experience something else in between then before you were called back to say, hey, we need you to actually run the program here instead of just being someone else that's a member in a teaching role?
Yeah, so after getting fired, I learned a lot from that experience because they broke down to me why I got fired, and
Mm,
then I also understood that I wasn't able to also get the objectives accomplished that they were requiring of me,
mhm,
and I was able to backtrack that and realize I can't get the objectives done because they don't respect me, and if they
mhm.
don't respect me, they're not going to do what I'm asking them to do. So taking those experiences, that really matured me in that time. And then it was probably a couple of years later that I got offered the other position. So
Gotcha.
we had a lot of conversations in between. There was a lot of guidance in between,
Mhm,
but then there also was a lot of trust. Like my CEO was heavy on the trust. It was almost as if trust was trust was given, but ultimately from him giving me the trust, then if I messed up, and then that's when I would start to lose it. So he
mhm.
trusted me going in,
Right.
but I just had to I just had to capitalize and do what was expected and what was needed.
Gotcha. That that's amazing that you mentioned that, because it's not only like a lot of people get fired, or I don't mean to harp on this, but I was just wanting
Oh,
to,
no, no, no.
I,
Take your
li-
time. I'm
I
fine.
like
Take your
the,
time.
I like how you presented it, because it's not just something that happened, but they took the time to actually let you know, hey, this is why we're letting you go. And then after the fact, keeping in contact and conversation to serve as a mentor to you, to like continue to foster that relationship and to help you develop as you developed on your own. But just you guys having that interaction, I think that that's not something a lot of people can say, like coming out of a job where it's like usually you could just you could have just gone your own way and been like, I'm not talking to them. But like you guys building that relationship, I think was something good. Like I think that it speaks volumes to that.
Yeah, and then just to bring a little clarity, because I didn't let you in all the way. So the organization I was working for initially
Mhm.
was called Services of Hope. And then Services of Hope had a contract with this partner organization. So I got fired from the partner organization. And
Mm.
that's why I was also able to remain close to the boss and to the CEO of Services of Hope, because
Okay.
this was the mentor for me. This was CEO for me. So it was a unique dynamic, but he still, kept a close eye. And then, I got fired from doing the job of teaching at that facility, but then I came back to Services of Hope, and then, I was still doing some other things there, but just wanted to bring that clarity. But I also still stayed in it,
Mm.
because that's one of the things where I could say, forget the partner organization, forget you, I'm
Mhm.
out, but I stayed in it.
Right.
And I couldn't, then later it provided opportunity later down the road.
Awesome. And and um with the opportunities that came down the road, what did you do to like build on the lessons that you got and develop that respect that you needed to get from other people and for the students for that matter?
So I learned that I'm gonna have to have uncomfortable conversations. So
Mhm.
let me give you one. Okay, let me give you one,
Mhm.
Asher. If you got
Yeah.
time, I'm gonna
Oh
give you
yeah, we have time.
man. So one day, because we're a nonprofit, so if the audience knows anything about nonprofits, that a lot of times they're overworked, underpaid. Sometimes the pay comes late. Sometimes you get part of a check when you were expecting to get the full check. And then I got called into the office by my CEO, and he said, Jonathan, um, he said, you're gonna have to tell them that they're not gonna get a check this week, but as soon as we get the money, we're gonna pay them.
Mhm.
Asher, imagine hearing this because my staff was probably about 5 teachers, and they range from some being uh, high school students, right? So like
Mhm.
16, 17, some being a senior citizen, and another one was like 21, 23. And all of them have their own specific needs, right? The high
Right.
school, their need is, wanting to buy some clothes or whatever. The 21, 23, their need is, wanting to have money for the weekend, pay phone bill, etc. So I had to tell them that. And I'm like, because he's the CEO.
Yeah.
So he's in a position where he can delegate that task to me. So I had to learn how to have those conversations and how to have them often. I had to have the conversations with parents about, oh, you're not paying your tuition for the after school program. So, we're gonna have to do something. Like what can you provide?
Mhm.
Because this is a service, and based on them paying us, then that's how my teachers got paid.
Right.
So man, it was tough, man. I learned a lot. And I also learned that kids will respect you and you have to come down hard on them. But in the end, as long as you do the right thing and as long as you operate with integrity, they know you do care. So it was a lot of lessons, man. It was so many lessons there.
Yeah. I'm glad that you highlighted that one because it always feels like, especially if you're coming from wanting to be nice, be friendly, it's a lot of times there's a tendency to avoid the difficult conversations because it's like,
Mhm.
well, they're not going to like me anymore. It's not going to come off in this way. But then surprisingly, they actually, if you're on the same page, they actually respect you more for that, for letting them know up front, and then not a year down the line, a month down the line, all of a sudden the rug gets swept out from underneath them. And then there's that resentment of like, you knew this whole time, but you didn't tell me. And then you're like in that
Mm.
lose-lose situation.
Yeah, it's like a conundrum because on one side you hear kids never forget, right?
Mhm.
You kids will bring up things that happened forever ago. You hear kids will never forget anything. But then on the other side of the equation, kids have the shortest term memory, Asher, because like I can come down hard on a kid for doing something that they know they're not supposed to do. Then tomorrow comes, they're like, hey, Mr. John, check this out. Da, da, da. And it's like, oh, okay. You're not even on what we were on yesterday. You've gotten
Mhm.
over that. Because just like I said before, when they realize and understand that you really do care,
Mhm.
then it's like a mental shift happens.
Right.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, I mean, for you to get into the nonprofit sector, did were you involved in some way in that on the other end as a kid?
Well, it was just, getting bribed early as a child. My mom saying, son, if you wake up early, we go volunteer. I get you McDonald's breakfast. And I wouldn't want to go,
Mhm.
because I was a kid staying up late the night before, playing video games, eating pizza. I don't want to go and volunteer. Why?
Mhm.
But, just getting around those environments at that age, my mom had me doing that.
Mhm.
Then with my father, because my parents divorced at a very young age, but then with my father, then we would go to nursing homes and
Mhm.
then we would give like little gift baskets just because those individuals in the nursing home wouldn't have family too often. So, just going showing love. But we did things like that. So that was something that's been a seed that's been planted in my life, for since forever, since I was as young as I can remember.
I like that. It's funny
Yeah,
because
man.
I like the honesty of it, and I can relate in a similar way where for me, I remember my dad's a pastor, and when we had
Mhm.
a church first moving to Dalton, we had the church over in the, I guess you could call it the black part of town, or in the same sense, like some people were less fortunate. It may be somewhat projects, but
Mhm.
they started this thing where they would, one Saturday out of the month, they would take fruit, like buy it from the local store using some of the tithes and offering, and
Mhm.
then go like make little bags, like some apples, oranges, and bananas, split them up in different bags,
Mhm.
like Walmart bags and things like that. And we
Mhm.
just walk down the neighborhoods and give them out until we ran out or try to have it enough. And I would get upset sometimes because it would be like we didn't grow up watching TV in our house, like no
Oh,
TV during
wow.
the week. Like maybe Saturday you could watch a little bit of TV during the morning. And I was like,
Wow.
it's the one thing like all the kids get to have, and they're always talking about these shows, and you're having like the coming to America moment where you're trying to learn the culture, but you don't have a clue. So that's how I was justifying it in my head. It's like, I'm upset, but you go to like the first door or the second door and you knock and you see, at first somebody thinks it's like you're a bill collector coming, and then they think you're trying to sell them something, and it's just like, no, just wanted to offer you some fruit, not trying to charge you, just thought you could use some, just something to have,
Mm.
something healthy to have. And they were grateful, and a lot of them would stop and just exercise that gratitude and want to pray with you sometimes or ask for prayer. And it was like, I'd get upset the first few times, but like you were saying, after a while, you're like, that seed that's planted in your head, it never goes away. So I definitely relate with you on that.
Yeah, man, for sure, for sure. And you know, it's one of those things that those of us who are blessed to have experiences like that, and you know, just various experiences at a young age. Then as we get older, then we start to see ourselves replicating the same process, or you
Mhm.
know, creating our own heirloom, if you will, or tradition, or whatever it might be, to then continue to do purposeful or impactful things. So
Right.
I love it, man. I love it.
And the reason I also said I like how you brought it up, just stating the honesty, because I think so many times it feels like if somebody just says like, oh, I did this since I was born, I've always loved it, I've always liked it. It's like, are you really human? Like you just love everything on earth, like you've never had disdain for anything, even if you were in the right or in the wrong. But it's like it made me feel like a little less of a jerk. So I was like, thank you for not leaving me on just jerk island over here by himself.
For sure. I got you. I got you.
But tell me a little bit about the how you got into podcasting and the podcast program that you're helping people with now.
Yeah. So initially it started with me hopping on an interview. I did an interview on this show called The Motive.
Mm.
It was a while ago, but did an interview. And then after, I talked to the producer and I was like, how do you set up a podcast? Like, how do you structure it? So he met up with me at Starbucks.
Mhm.
He got a piece of paper, he had a pen, and he laid out like the flow of a show. You know, your intro, you do it 15, 30 seconds, and come in, you do the body. He laid it out basically like an essay. And
Mm.
you know, having your show, this is the flow of the show. And then I was like, oh, okay. So then I went at it by myself. I hit him up here and there for some answers. Shout out to Dennis McMurray. He's the one who helped me out. And then I just really dove into it. Started a podcast, wanting to, you know, with my first podcast, Speak Your Success, I wanted to serve and support millennials with
Mm.
tangible self-help strategies for success. And then after that, then when you first met me, Asher, then I was doing the Beyond the Ball podcast to help student athletes succeed beyond their degree.
Mm.
And then now, since then, I put those two down. You know, I never completely ended Speak Your Success. It's like I kind of just put a imaginary pause in my head.
Mhm.
um, and then I came and started the Your Podcast Mentor Show. So this one was started with the most intentional purpose of them all, because with this platform, the goal is to help people through the podcast, you know, talking about launching and monetizing, while also using this to help position me and further serve and support, you know, other clients with my podcast program, where I'm helping people do the same thing. But
Mhm.
of course, in my personal program, I'm going more in depth and people are getting customized feedback and support. But at the end of the day, Asher, I think you know, like I know, how beautiful the medium of podcasting is, and the opportunity is endless. So, you know, that's what brings us to where we're at right now, and just looking to really serve and support 1,000 speakers, coaches, and consultants to start, launch, and monetize their podcast.
Awesome. It seems like you've been in the speaking space for a bit, like being on TEDx as well as podcasting, being interviewed, and just in the same sense of, I think it still revolves around the topic of teaching, like you mentioned at the start, where it's you're looking to give something to the people with which you're communicating.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for noticing. And one thing, this is the reason why I asked you, because going back when I first started speaking, because I've been speaking a year longer than I've been podcasting. But when I first went to a school and I spoke, this was the pinnacle of seeing the Eric Thomas, and just really, when you want to succeed as bad as you want to breathe, then you'll be successful. This was, just when that was just thriving.
Mhm.
And I was like, I want to do that. But I didn't understand that there's so much more than just the motivation and so much more than the message.
Mhm.
So after going to a couple of schools and feeling like I got them fired up, the question for me then was, but what are they going to do when I leave? So that's why every time when I speak anywhere, anytime when I have a podcast, I strategically have some objectives that I want to accomplish, or at least put the audience in position to accomplish themselves. So that's when it comes to when I speak, when I podcast, wherever it is, I want to make sure that people have something tangible to walk away with, and then they can plug this in, and then they can begin to yield some form of success from what's shared. So, man, yeah, that's why I'm so passionate about teaching, because I want you to learn something and I want you to have success, period.
I like that. I guess seeing someone like Dr. Eric Thomas, what stood out to you as, I can do this in my own way without necessarily copying? Like, because obviously I have a different demeanor from you, but I feel like our demeanor may be closer to like NET, where like people are like, he just screams a lot, but it seems that you can still speak with purpose and passion without having to be like a replicate or somebody else. Like everyone has their own voice. So what helped you find your voice in that speaking journey?
Yeah, excellent question. Excellent question. There was points where I was trying to replicate the Dr. Eric Thomas. So I definitely have to be honest about that. But then, just like you said, I had to realize that wasn't me. That wasn't there. There are some presentations, some areas where the passion does come through, but for me, my biggest area, or my biggest gift, is the ability to storytell. So I want to create the relatability, and I want to inspire you by me having you, because sometimes I with some audiences, I'll ask them to close their eyes, and then I'll allow them to paint their own vision from their perspective.
Mhm.
So now I'm going on a journey with you. Basically, I'm narrating your journey in your life. So I realized that was my space, because I love to storytell.
Mm.
And I once heard it said that you should never tell a story without giving a point. And you should never give a point without telling a story. So eventually, through practicing and through working with coaches like Kendall Fickling, that's how I identified my niche and my area. It was seeing that storytelling was my space. So then just telling the story. Just telling the story and giving the principle.
Mm. Like, how did that come about for you? Like seeing that my thing is storytelling, and how did you develop that? Were you always a good storyteller as a kid? Like everybody would gather around and be like, hey guys, this is what happened 5 minutes ago in this way. And then like you're animated, or like, is that something you had to learn more so through the coaching with Kendall?
Actually, you're really good at this, man. You're really good at this.
I've been watching The Teacher.
Oh man. So with storytelling, Kendall Ficklin actually, I feel that he imparted that in me. So I think it's two pieces. The
Mhm.
first piece is ever since I was young, my parents would always read stories, right?
Mhm.
Dr. Seuss, Bernstein Bears, just down the line, read the stories. And then I got a little bit older, and then my dad would read like stories from like email chain letter type stories. And I started to realize how gifted my father was, because my father's a pastor as well,
Mhm.
evangelist.
Mhm.
So I grew up seeing him preach and hearing him speak, and I was like, wow, because he's really gifted. So seeing him, and then when I got to Kendall had this challenge for all of us who first came in this program. When he first rolled it out, he said, I want you to do a 10-minute video for me. And I was like, what? This is before I really started speaking. I'm like, what? You want to do what? He said, do a 10-minute video and give me a principle. So I sat the camera up and I started recording the video. And then I'm, doing the thing, doing the video. And then after, he would say, just keep telling the story. Just keep telling that story. And then when he said that, I was like, okay. And then through practice and repetition, then he taught us something called the 80-20 principle, where you give 80% story, 20% principle. And that's where I began to get indoctrinated in this philosophy of 80-20. Okay. So now whenever I go speak anywhere, I'm like, okay, what story am I going to tell? Before I record a podcast episode, I'm like, what story? What story? What story? Because the story creates the relatability. And then if you relate to somebody wherever they are, despite their age, despite their color, if you relate to somebody through story and you allow them to see themselves in the story, that's when the transformation happens. That's when you start seeing people cry and all this other stuff. And I'm not saying, I've just made people cry. I'm not saying that's me. I'm just saying when you see the videos of people crying, because people, they feel the hurt of the person who lost their daughter, who lost their son, who lost their child. They're like, oh, so that's where it comes from. So yeah. So I I would just say that it's just understanding that. Well, let me take a step back. Let me take a step back. I'm around this point off. But understanding that when I hop on a podcast, when I'm getting ready to do a podcast, when I'm getting ready to speak, although I tell stories from my own personal life,
Mhm.
the presentation is not about Jonathan Jones. The presentation is about the transformation that needs to go forward for the audience. I just happen to be blessed to have the opportunity to be behind the mic or be on the stage or whoever it is. So it's understanding you need a framework. And then with the framework, you pull out the principle, and then you get the people to transformation.
Well said. Well said. I love that.
Yeah, man. I'm grateful for every coach that I've had, from Kendall Ficklin to my father. My father was my first coach.
Mhm.
But down the line, man, David Shands, just down the line, and now working with Words Taylor. Because one thing I've also begun to learn, Asher, is when we don't pay for certain lessons, they carry no value.
Mhm.
Right? Like think about it. If have you ever broken a bone before?
Somewhat, not all the way through, but it was like it was minute but significant enough.
And do you remember how you broke it?
Yeah, yeah. Can't forget it. I still feel it till this day.
Exactly, man. I tried to skip 3 monkey bars. I made it, but then I twisted my arm and then fell on it. It was broken. Since then, I'll always think twice before I skip for multiple monkey bars or before I take just a big challenge. But that's the thing. I paid for that lesson. So, it's just one of those things. Lessons we pay for, they
Yeah.
carry a little bit bigger of a punch.
That makes sense on that point. Kind of going back to your podcasting program, I think um, as I see different people develop programs in getting coaching and paying for individual coaches or joining a community, it seems that a big thing that always comes out of it is that you you need to give some sort of payment in order to get the lesson, because there are certain things you could do quote unquote free. And
Mhm.
a lot of times, even when I'm doing the podcasting, is I'm improving steadily, I'm doing better about not looking to the left and to the right. It's like, if this is what I can pay for now with my time and attention, or if this is what I can pay for this type of editing, let me do that and not look and try to become someone else. Because then it's like, if I just have what they have, I don't know what they paid to get there. So I shouldn't
Mm.
envy that too much.
Asher, I don't want you to brush past what you just said. You got to say that again, man. You got to say that again for the audience, man. That last piece was heavy. That
Well,
last piece was heavy, man.
I mean, the a big thing for this year for me has just been like staying in my lane and not getting overcome so much with wanting what someone else has, because I can theoretically pay the amount that they paid to go to a certain person to have a certain look, but if I don't know how they got there, I can be too envious and just say, "Oh, I want this because I heard it can do this for me." But
Mm.
if I can't afford that payment, it's going to put me in worse shape than I could have been if I just took my time and went through the process in my own way.
Yeah, it's kind of like, and math was my worst subject, so I'm just using this for an analogy, but it's kind of like the y equals mx plus b. When we work out when we work out that formula or that equation, we get a certain result. In each one of us, we're the x, but the equation isn't always going to come out the same, because just like you said, you know, what's this person's experience, or where is this person from, or who is this person connected to? There are so many other factors that potentially can affect elevation, trajectory, or reach, or whatever. I mean, whatever analytics we're measuring by. But I think that's one of the things that is most dangerous in our time now, is just understanding that just because Asher has this opportunity, if I was put in the same spot, that doesn't mean I'm going to capitalize the same way that Asher did. That's just not the way the world works.
Yeah. Well, I'll get you out of here on this one, because I know time is precious and of the essence. My last question to you is, are you still who you say you are?
Yes, I am still who I say I am. Going back to the first, or going back to one of the pieces that I said that I am, is a lifelong learner. And for me, that's looked different in different seasons. So in this season, I'm learning more about being, not being a good husband or not being a great husband, but being a husband the way that God calls me to be. So I'm really learning a lot about that in this season. And, you know, I mean, like the business stuff, you know, I just go through the process of, you know, learning what my coach teaches me. So I think the business piece is more easy
Mhm.
versus being the husband that God requires and expects me to be. And I'm I'm in the remedial classes right now, Asher. I'm starting from the bottom.
Hey, honesty is the best policy, as they say. And I appreciate the candidness just to say some things are easier, other things may be more challenging, but you're willing to step up to the challenge. I appreciate that about you.
Yeah, man. And sometimes it hurts, Asher. Sometimes it hurts, man.
Yeah. Thank you for the time, man.
Most definitely, man. Thank you for, allowing me to come on the platform and just share a little bit about my story. I
You're
appreciate you
welcome.
and the work that you're doing.
Oh, before I let you go, let the people know where they can find you and how they can become a part of your program or just connect with you online and offline.
Gotcha. So I'll make it easy. So the people can text # podcast to 678-658-3627. And that's so they can get a free podcast launch checklist. So if there's anybody who's, wanted to start a podcast and didn't know where to start, #podcast, text that to 678-658-3627. But I'm Jonathan Jones Speaks on all social media platforms. And, shoot me a DM and feel free, of course, to check out the show, your podcast, Mentor with Jonathan Jones. But thank you again, Asher. I appreciate you, man. And just definitely love your heart, man. I love your
Thank you.
heart.
You're welcome. And thank you for the compliments.
Most definitely. Most definitely.